All
Or
right,
were we actually?
we're back. We're back. We were just about to shit on the Calvinists. I don't know
Oh,
if
right.
that got through any of. Yeah, maybe God heard that I was going to shit on Calvinists, so he predestined the stream to go offline when I started that.
The stream was always going to fail. There was nothing we could have done differently.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's right.
This is why you should take no precautions in life. You just cross the street, go for it. Don't look, just go for it. It happens either way.
To be honest, this gets into an interesting point about predestination and free will, because, you will make decisions, but it's not that you don't have the power to make the decision. It's just that the configuration of neurons and like the mental processes that make you make that decision will always have happened in the same way, if that makes sense.
No, that's an incredibly materialistic way of going about things. It's just that the reason is that God can't let me say this in a way carefully not to offend any Christians listening, but let's just say that I think that God can't fully see into our heads, and there's some biblical evidence to make a case for that, right? There's a reason one of the 10 commandments is that you shouldn't tempt God. God has, you can say that he can get angry and he can get really butt mad as well. You shouldn't disrespect him, you shouldn't taunt him, and you shouldn't tempt him. And he says there's also a story in the Old Testament where a guy gets into an argument with God and he wins the argument, and God concedes the point and finds this hilarious. I think that there's a case to be made that God can't fully see into our heads, and that he has given us, when Eve bit the apple, she got free will and then got a divine power for humanity, which is free will, and that's a gift that God can't put constraints on. Christianity is about showing us that how we can use our free will to act in accordance to God's will, but we also have the free will to not do so. The problem with predestination, I feel, is that if you believe it, then you also believe that God is the author of sin. When people do awful and degenerate things, it's because
most
God
Protestants believe that. Most Protestants believe that. I mean, John Milton's Paradise Lost is all about how the devil rebelled against God, but that was part of God's plan anyway.
God basically gave the devil his powers so that he could tempt humanity.
Yeah,
but
that's
he never
in Job
made,
as well.
He never
loses
made.
Everything.
He doesn't force people. That's one of the very important things, is that he doesn't force people to commit evil or to sin. God doesn't dirty his hands with that. It's humanity that does it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say that you're predestined to go to hell, as all non-Calvinists basically are, then you're basically saying that God has forced these people to do these terrible things, and he's forcing them to go to hell, which is an incredibly awful way, I feel, to go about this thing.
Well, I'm not too familiar with the actual theology of Calvinism. See, the reasons that I'm Calvinist are very simple. It's because it's the most popular traditional religious denomination in the Netherlands. It used to be the dominant denomination when we were an actual successful nation, and we used to be in control. We have our colonies and all that.
Catholic at this point, because so many Calvinists have just become atheists.
So in that sense, because it's you're Calvinist because it's your ethnic religion, but to be honest, that just makes you a pagan as far as I'm concerned. Because if you don't actually know the fucking scripture about it and you're just doing it because it's your ethnic religion, then welcome to paganism.
Well, another reason was that I read a lot of Max Weber and his arguments about how Calvinism lead to prosperity and are very successful in a material sense, which I guess makes me a worse materialist than you.
To be honest, listen, Fausto, I think that there's a lot of reverse reasoning going on with that, because I don't think it's that Calvinism and Protestant work ethic made Germanic people be productive. I think it's that Germanic people already had those traits, but they chose to be that because it suited them. It wasn't causal. It was inversely causal.
Let me come with a hot take here. All right. What about this scenario? That Catholicism is for the barbaric and to tame the barbaric to reach a higher level of consciousness. And then when you reach that, you can go to the next level, closer to God, which is Lutheranism. And basically, when all of Europe was much more barbaric, it was completely Catholic. But then when the Germanics and the Nords basically became more enlightened, more civilized, they could go beyond that. And that's why we see the barbaric Irish and the Polish still being stuck with Catholicism.
But hold on. Lutheranism is basically an ethnic Germanic expression of Christendom, because if you actually look at Luther and the geopolitical effects and the general cultural environment that it caused, Lutheranism was completely interwoven with Germanic nationalism and Germanic cultural revival.
Well, I don't know if you can take full credit for that. I mean, Sweden, Finland, when Finland was part of Sweden, we were also one of the first to convert to Protestantism, even though it was at first it was just about administrative change. It was about making sure that it took too long for the Pope to appoint bishops.
What I mean specifically is that within the Holy Roman Empire, it led to an assertion of a Germanic identity and a revival of Germanic culture, and a distrust of the Italian, French, and other parts of the empire, like the Czech.
So it's similar in that way to the Hussites, because that was the Bohemian Czech national identity, and they sort of hung on to that for a little while. It's similar to that, but I was going to say at least a point in favor of the sort of Protestantism leading to prosperity is, you know, I don't think you could say that the Germanic parts of Europe really economically were ahead of the, you know, Romance and Greek speaking parts until after Protestantism happened. Like, you know, the Holy Roman Empire was in no way, shape, or form more developed than, say, you know, northern Italy or, you know, Spain or France.
See, the problem there was that they were all basically like Varg. They were all just sitting in their little huts in the field and saying, no, you got to just live a simple life. They were just telling each other that, and then the Italians came and forced us to civilize, and now we're just going back to the whole Varg thing.
See, I think it's more that, so, you know, you get a lot of similar narratives of this when people talk about how Northern Europe in like the Roman era was a lot backwards compared to Southern Europe. I think it's a matter of population density. And you get to a critical mass of population density where the traits of a certain group can express themselves in civilization. Because, you know, when you just have like 1 million people in the British Isles as a whole, then you're not going to have cities or grand urban construction. And in the same way, Northern Europe was very, very, you know, sparsely populated compared to Southern Europe until around about that time. So I think that's probably got more to do with it. I'm very skeptical of like causal effects of religion making people productive.
But daily reminder that in Europe, Protestants are outbreeding all other sects of Christianity. So we must be God's chosen people.
That's another reason for me.
Not in Ireland. That's true. That's true. Not in Ireland. That is the only exception. But then again, if you say that Ulster people are Protestants, then oh boy, that's a whole kind of word.
Well, see, that's another reason for me to be a Calvinist, is that the Calvinist political party and community here are still very, very organized and structured, and they also have an average of 2.4 children per woman.
Yeah, your SPG party doesn't your SPG party want to either abolish democracy or at least restrict votes to male head of households?
Yes, it wants to restrict female voting. It wants to ban homosexuality. Ban homosexuality, throw out foreign religions, all these sorts of things.
Well, I mean, did you guys see that really funny article title where it was like Catholics and Protestants unite in Northern Ireland ... against racial and sexual minorities?
Yes, I loved that. Oh man.
Yeah,
no, that was good. I was going to say on the population density point, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure the sort of Viking Age was a result of there being population pressures in Scandinavia in the first place. That's why they all had to leave and go, you know, invade southwards in the first place. But even then, you know, Sweden or Norway weren't, I mean, Scandinavian history isn't my strong point, but then again, they were basically irrelevant outside of the Northern War, so once.
Well, there's still only like 10 million people in Sweden.
Yeah.
Which and about 8 million of them are Somalian.
and if we're talking proportion,
I think 7 or 8 million of them are ethnic Swedes. The rest are other immigrants. About 1 million is non-European immigrants, and
that's fucking insane.
European immigrants.
But like even like you can look at per capita, you can look at things like per capita, but you can also just see proportionally. Poland, there's 40 million people, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sweden has an altogether higher GDP, like not even just per capita, just altogether higher than Poland as a whole.
Yeah, well, obviously that's a communism thing, I think, more than anything else. I think we underestimate like just how much that did, because like,
maybe look at Italy or something that wasn't under communism in Southern Europe, or Spain. And I mean, you can find like relative circumstances in every country. But I still think like Northern Europe. I'm becoming more and more of a biological determinist on these things, and I think, it could go either way, but that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, well, it's really tough with the Southern European ones. Italy, it's obvious, like they unified very late. They never had, they never really developed because they had a real resource shortage. Like they had basically like no coal, so industrialization was really hard for them.
I was correct, by the way. Sweden has a higher GDP overall than Poland.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's one thing I wanted to just put in as a caveat. One Swedish stereotype that's often overlooked is how incredibly thrifty these people are. Leave Swedes to their own devices. You put Swedes in any country, and you'll see that they usually tend to be stick around 3 or 2% unemployment. These guys, like, the only thing they do is work and party. It's the only thing Swedes do.
Yeah, that's whole Max Weber's assertion is that Protestant countries are more thrifty because if you believe in predestination, you believe in that God has a plan for everyone. Having success means that you are adhering to God's plan, which encourages success, and it encourages thriftiness because you're wanting to achieve more success. Which is why we, for example,
it's interesting. It is interesting, but I'd say that at the very least, it's a combination of just genetic traits and things like that. I'm not sure.
Well, the thing is, it's still hard to square the genetic determinism with, being irrelevant for the first, 1,000 years of European history post-Christ, for instance.
There's a biological factor, but there's also a religious cultural factor because
it's a multiple collinearity thing. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's hard to say.
Dutch and Flemish are the same race, for example, as are Dutch and Germans, I suppose. But let's say tribal identity in tribals as well. Dutch and Flemish are pretty much the same people, but we're still considerably richer than the Flemish, and they're a bunch of work-shy papists.
Right, but the Flemish are also they're the productive ones in Belgium, and the Walloons aren't, right?
Yeah, but the Walloons are Celtic French, so you can't really expect much of them anyway.
Yeah, I feel bad.
Interesting little tidbit of knowledge that the etymology for Walloons and Welsh comes from the same thing.
And the same with Vlachs and Venice, all from the German word for basically belching, because they couldn't understand what all these Celts were, all these non-Germans were speaking.
Well, it was I think it's the Latin name for a Celtic tribe, Walkai, and then that came to mean foreigner. So Walish in Old English morphed into Welsh because it just meant Celt foreigner.
Does it relate to Wallachia as well?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I was saying the Vlachs. It's all these people who don't speak German in the same way.
Basically.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same. These are people who don't. It's the term for people who don't speak German. I read somewhere, some podcast on German history, that was with the Wends too. The Wends in Germany, the Wends, they're another Slavic people. It's all just one word that means it's like barbar. It's a word that just sort of means general. It doesn't actually have a real meaning. It's just sort of like this
Not
noise
us.
that we make for how foreigners talk.
We do.
Yeah.
Well, it's
We do.
like if
Booga.
it's like yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that, Blitz.
We do have stories about.
I tried
like,
to jump in and you rudely just said it because that shows the difference in temperament between our peoples, isn't it?
The virgin Anglo waits for his turn to speak. It's the Chad thing who just shouts it and gets all the credit. So, but I wanted
But we
to
do have stories
touch on-
about the Vendel. Yeah, hold on. We do have stories about the fighting against the Vendel as well in our folk myth.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. All right.
Carry on. No. Another thing that I wanted to actually talk about the whole pagan thing is that we've got pretty interesting stories about how the Netherlands was Christianized, and there's a movie coming out about it this summer called Red Bud. It's about the fight between Christians and pagans to Christianize the Netherlands. And what I was surprised to learn is that we were only Christianized about a century after the UK, so we actually held out quite a lot longer.
That's right. Well, I mean, depends what you mean by the UK, because the Saxons came to what was a Christianizing Britain, and then it took
De-Christianized, and then it got re-Christianized
right
a couple hundred
by
years
the
later.
Irish. The Irish brought Celtic Christianity over, and then we were sort of more aligned towards what you could call orthodoxy pre-schism, before 1054. And then when 1054 happened, we were then aligned more to the Orthodox side. We were Chalcedonians. And then, of course, the Normans, they were actually, it could be seen as a Catholic crusade. They had a papal bull trying to bring us closer into the Catholic fold. So, yeah, interesting how Catholicism was brought to England.
Now, I wanted to take this to a new topic here. Ethnic religions. I think it's very important that each people stick to, or each religion is in effect an expression of a people, and I'm very critical when I see people going, deracinated people who drop their own religion because it's so cucked, Dad. I don't want to go to church with you. I got Thor, if I want to straw man it too much. But when I see Anglos or burgers going for Norse paganism, or even like LARPers who go for orthodoxy. Thank you. Yeah, we see that.
I quite agree. I agree.
I remember when I was 18 years old. I remember that, and I thought that atheism was so cucked, but so was my church. So what should I go for? Should I be Catholic or Orthodox, guys? Remember those threads on Pulp? It's just full. It's full of deracinated teenagers.
Yeah, it strikes me as such a sort of you have this sort of market stall of things that you can pick and choose from. I mean, I'm very clear. I'm an English pagan. It's Thunor, Woden, and Saxony. It's not like Thor, Loki. It's fucking
No, that's all. Hold on, that's imported Danish and Saxon paganism. You should go back to the really old Celtic stuff.
Well, I mean, you can do a bit of that, but I'm English. I speak English, so I practice what the English brought when they came here.
I think to be authentic, you have to do a 23andMe, and then you have to see okay, I'm 60% Saxon, so I'm going to worship. Yeah,
I'm 82% British, native British. So okay. I mean, maybe, but the culture that I exist in is English. So
then you have to worship 82% of the time. You get to worship Woden, and the rest you have to.
in the same way as the Turks. The Turks are. That's a very materialistic way of looking at things, Faust. But in the same way as the Turks, maybe 3% actually. I don't know what percentage it is, but they're barely at all Central Asian, right?
Yeah,
but
it
they speak a Central Asian language.
What part of the?
Yeah. But my point is, the Turks are still genetically native Anatolians. It's just that they have this culture which they live, and that's what I do as an Englishman. But I would say to the English, I'd say you can only choose from Anglicanism, really, or if your parents were Catholic or something, then sure. But you should choose something that is native to you. I completely agree with Blitz. It's just that, in my opinion, Christianity doesn't cut it because it isn't native to Europe as a whole. But I quite agree
that's just where we disagree, because
right.
I think that Christianity is very much as it has been expressed all through the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, and even up to the Enlightenment, it's been very much an expression of the European spirit and the European man and how we go about doing things. Now, of course, a lot of people look at it because with disdain, because they either take it. They take that modern heresy that Christianity is completely foreign to violence, and you should always be a cock in this when faced with threats of violence. The misinterpretation of the line "turn the other cheek," which is not what many people on the internet, especially anti-Christian posters, want to tell you it is about. It's it's about picking your battles. It's when you're a piss poor farmer without weapons, and a Roman soldier slaps you, you should turn the other cheek, so he's forced to slap you on the right cheek instead of the left, which was it was a cultural thing back there when if you slapped a slave on the left cheek and you slapped your equals on the right, so you would
sounds weak to me. See, a proper German, you just attack the nobleman. You try to drag him off his horse, and if he kills you, that's
someone pushes you push them back. Everyone is pagan.
The thing is that Christianity, what Jesus taught them, was to protect themselves. Sell your cloak, buy a sword.
Yeah, exactly.
Heroic
do not try to take on the entire Roman Empire with sticks.
Yes, you should.
You should.
A heroic death is better than to live as a slave.
I have to say, man, that is Nietzsche was right about the whole slave morality thing. They essentially conquered a continent through, like this appealing to the slave class and the lowly and the underbelly of society. That's how Christianity
kind of like the socialists.
Yeah,
like the socialists.
Yeah, that's why so many leaders were converted first to Christianity and then forced the lower ranks of society. See, I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
No, it did spread. Hold on. It spread that way in Northern Europe, but in Southern Europe, it spread through the lower classes first. Yeah. As like the same way Mithraic cult spread.
Constantine,
cult.
Yeah. Constantine was the first emperor to be a Christian, and then he declared it the sort of the state religion.
He considered it tolerant, but he favored obviously people within his. Yeah, it's a little bit different.
I don't think he was actually like properly a Christian. I think he used it, but that's beside the point. Like the point being that Christianity spread in the cities of Rome around the Mediterranean basin amongst the lower classes, and it was a slave religion. And I think it does make appeals to weakness. Your God allowed himself to be nailed to a tree, and apparently this was his great, achievement.
He died for our sins, yes.
His great achievement was making the universe, really. But, besides the point.
Oh, and that.
There was another thing.
There was that other thing.
I mean, there's a reason that the cross is the emblem, and I don't massively enjoy like attacking people for attacking what people believe. But I mean, I'm just having a frank discussion here. But I forget what my original point was, but I just went on a tangent.
No, it's understandable. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys listen to the Godcast, since it is on the TRS network, but they have episodes on self-defense, when is it proper to rebel, and there's all these particular rules about it. But the thing that is part of what's driving this sort of what you call the slave morality is essentially the hierarchical nature of it. So a lot of the don't rebel, don't fight too hard is born out of the you should be listening to the people who are in charge of you. So you should be listening to your kings. You should be listening to your parents. You should be listening to your husband. It's all sort of part of a sort of greater hierarchy, and that's one of the primary ways you actual decent Christians should probably actually be thinking about it, rather than in a just sort of the cucky view of it.
One thing that you said, Blitz, was it's an expression of of Europeans for centuries. And I agree with that it's like it was an outlet for that. But I think that, we created beautiful works, even as far as Northern Europe. Like, we created beautiful works before Christianity came on the scene. And I think that we just did it in spite of Christianity, not because of it. Like, we created things to honor Christ and to honor Christian themes. But at the same time, there were great works that we composed when we were pagan and when we weren't Christian. So I think that was just a continuation of the same thing. It's just it happened to be about Christian themes, until of course you get to the Reformation, where huge amounts of great Catholic works were demolished by fucking autistic Protestants.
Yeah, well,
they didn't deserve to be destroyed
all at once.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to argue about the what was the cause of the great art, because I really don't think we have any real understanding of what causes this or what inspires this, and it's not a. I don't think you can actually come to any conclusions arguing about the validity of a religion based on like how nice the art looks.
Right. But I think the utilitarian case is being made there that this is the thing that it's been important to Europeans, and I wouldn't deny that necessarily. But I think that Europeans, no matter what we fucking believe, well, unless we have a spiritual void like now. If we have something,
I was just about to say that we
good point.
We need something. Europe,
I agree. Well,
definitely
that's where you and I agree.
Yeah, exactly. So that Christianity is a great way of inspiring people to do art and do great things, because faith in God is so powerful that it can move mountains.
Horatio, I'm going to say you're being way too reasonable for this stream. Could you be like, more autistic and aggressively anti-theist, perhaps?
Don't get me wrong. I would prefer Christianity to what we have now. Certainly, I prefer anything. I prefer Islam. I'd prefer Islam to this.
That was
unironically.
Well, yeah, same here. But I was actually going to ask, if we have to stick to our own ethnic religions and so on, according to you, but at what point does cultural Marxism last enough among our peoples to become the religion of our people, and we have to stick with it because it's a tradition?
It's kind of a good point.
Oh shit, man! Well, logic trapped, dude. What the fuck? I love. Yeah, no, it's just that the roots of the Frankfurt School is so alien to me that
Say Horkheimer.
I think our goal should be that when
have you prayed to Boaz lately?
And the demographics continue like this, that the white people of Europe will split into two camps: the ones descended of Protestant churches, their followers, and the ones the few who are descended of the cocky majority, and those will form basically two clans who will battle. There will be the Great Brother War, when the descendant of the Marxists which is like 80% of the population, 90% of the population today, in a few generations, when they're like 50-50, and then we'll have a big war, and then we'll settle what religion should dominate Europe.
So what's in Finland? I understand there's like a little bit of Orthodox influence in parts of Finland.
It's probably just Russian transplants, right?
Yeah, it's like we had the Karelians, right, in eastern part of Finland. The reason they don't see themselves really as Finns, even though they're ethnically Finns, is because they're Orthodox and we're Protestant.
Ah, okay.
But basically, aren't Karelians like disappearing anyways?
Well, yeah, low birth numbers. Nobody lives in northwestern Russia, and basically, all the Finns in Karelia, when the war started and the Russians came, they took everything they could, and then they just fled westwards. Like, there was a huge migration. 90% or even like entire villages were sometimes abandoned. Like,
all 5 of them left Karelia.
Yeah, that's the reason like why Finland doesn't want Karelia back, is because we got what we wanted out of it anyways. We saved the people, and that's what we were fighting for. All the people had to be relocated within the new borders.
I was going to ask one more thing. Just what is your relation with the Estonians? Because they're like the only other people who speak your language, but I never see any sort of iridescentism in Finland trying to say take Estonia, especially considering there are like only 1 million of them, and they basically are going to be replaced by Russians within 50 years.
No, they're not. Right? No, they're not. They're not. That's
the
like
Estonians are fucking like they're very nationalistic.
Yeah. If the fun thing about Estonian political scene, because it's sort of like like Alice in Wonderland here. Some things are so upside down there that in the Baltic countries, the Antifa are the ones that are infiltrated and destroyed from within by federal agents, because in the Antifa and the anti-fascists are basically the Russian imperialists, the people who are ethnically Russian within the Baltics, who just cry for more fascist oppression when they aren't given citizenship because they're ethnically Russian. They're literally paid for by Russian diplomats, and they get training from the Russian government. They're subversive elements who act as agents of the state for Russia within Estonia and Latvia. That's Antifa and the left.
Yeah.
The USSR literally did nothing wrong types.
Yeah. I miss the days when the Germans used to rule the Baltics, it used to be the elite there. Real shame.
The fun thing is that German aristocracy used to rule Estonia for hundreds of years, about 500-600 years, and the Estonian peasants got really tired of this. They thought that, hey, we're doing all the work and all the dying and plowing the fields, and while these rich Germans are living in the cities. And even though Estonia changed hands, went from one country to another, the aristocracy remained the same. It was ethnically German. And they thought this was very unfair when nationalism came to Europe. So they were happy when the German aristocracy was driven away by the Soviets in World War II, and thought, hey, finally we're going to be free with the
World War I.
Estonian Soviet Republic. And then an Estonian nationalist said this to me so well, that 600 years of German oppression or like animosity was washed away in 1 year when they were ruled by Russians. Because Russians are a million times worse, and that's why many Estonians volunteered to fight for the Germans against the Russians, because they knew that they were fighting for their survival if the Russians ever got back.
That happened in 1917 after the Brest-Litovsk Treaty. The Soviets invaded Estonia. The Estonians managed to hold on for a time and actually invited German troops to come help them. Because the Germans operated in the Baltic states until 1924, the Eiserne Division, which was a Freikorps of irredentists who wanted to conquer the Baltic states for the German Empire, despite the German Empire having stopped existing.
Yeah.
So initially they actually fought the Red Army mainly, but then they actually took the capital of Latvia and marched on Estonia, and they were pretty clearly intent on just conquering the Baltic states.
Yeah, they wanted to install a German autocrat on the throne of Latvia, and so the Latvians and Estonians teamed up to beat the Germans, so it helped them win against the Russians.
With the help of the Eternal Anglo, who used gunboats to shell the German troops.
I don't know what you're referencing.
We would have had the Finnish nationalists were very happy to install a German prince on the throne, because the monarchists had super high popularity in Finnish government just after the Civil War in 1918.
Well, you had 2,000
and we were about to, and we had invited German troops as well to help us fight off the communists. They didn't do much, but they did a little. It was more symbolic that we wanted to be.
They showed up.
Yeah, they showed up and they fought like 2 battles. But
if you look at the commanders of the Finnish Civil War, and you look at the surnames, every single fucking communist has a Finnish surname, and all of the was it the whites? They had fucking German-sounding Swedish surnames.
Yeah, there were lots of Fenno-Swedes. Mannerheim himself was a Fenno-Swede. It's important to note that the Fenno-Swedes were like in some parts made up the core of the of the conservative forces. And it's funny to think that just as like the Germans back then were based, they were super politically, what we would say, based, just as the Fenno-Swedes were the most based back then. And I see this same thing all over Europe, that all the people that used to be completely shit tier in the 1900s are conservative today, and all the ones who were based back then are complete liberal today. Fenno-Swedes are the most liberal ethnicity.
Well, the Anglos and the French are still shit. They haven't changed.
But they're extremely liberal. That's my point, is that they were actually had their shit together. They actually had could speak positively of their own country and be proud of it. They had some sort of racial consciousness as well. All these people, I would love to have some theory why this is. All these people today seem to manifest this shit tier liberalism.
Isn't
Well, I
it
think it's a
because
matter of-
you go.
I was going to say it's there's part of it is it's money and not having any sort of real conflict, basically. So basically there's a worldwide, there's a decent correlation between basically being rich and not caring about your ethnic, religious, whatever identity. Like you can see this, across time and space. The cities have always been rich. The cities have always been the places with the most sort of radical liberal types, even going back to like 1848. Those nationalists, quote unquote, were very much liberal nationalist types. And it's always in these areas where you've got the most money and leisure time, and you're focusing on sort of status competitions within your little upper class or your upper middle class. That's where you see all this. Whereas in contrast, you look at Poland is relatively to all these other European countries kind of poor, but they're significant. They care about these other things because it's been under attack. They care about their identity because it was attacked and suppressed by communists, or they stuff like that. It's a hard sort of thing. It's a hard thing to sort of thread the needle between being successful and letting the sort of pause drip in. That's just seems to be a sort of constant issue, and that's one of those things where it's like this is a sort of long-term problem that I don't think anyone has really hammered out, besides saying, well, we'll just kill all the liberals. It's like, well, there'll be more, I think.
The issue is modernity, wealth.
Yeah, because I was reading stuff where like there are even people in like China, the last place you'd think of it. There are even people in China who buy the same sort of, narratives that are basically like repackaged white guilt narratives. Yeah, exactly. It is fashionable, but it's still,
if they're global elite types in China, then that wouldn't surprise me really.
Right, exactly. It's the same sort of, it's that same group of people. And I think another part of the issue is just that like who gets involved in running things, like who becomes a teacher, who becomes a journalist, who becomes a politician. It's people who are ideological and typically don't have kids, because like journalism doesn't pay well.
This is the problem as well. When I'm a lot like involved with students and student unions here, and I see like the stereotypes between the schools, and it's awful when you see like the people who are studying what's it called, teaching in different forms for both kids and adults. You see that these like shit tier liberals, they're all like, you have to ask them for their pronouns and shit like that. When we party with these people, we say amongst the guys, watch your pronouns, like jokingly, like, because you're gonna trigger these fucking feminists otherwise. These are the people who are gonna become the teachers for the next generations, the most shitlib. And ever since we allowed women to study theology here in Finland, about immediately after that reform, 80% of all students of theology have been women.
Christ,
it's awful. That's something. If you believe that a woman should be able to be a priest, then you're a heretic. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's no question on that one. That's
I don't think
really
they should be druids. I'll say that.
Oh man, it's just so shit. All these, like, also the people who study journalism, like, big shocker. The people who study journalism, they're always really like shit tier liberals, and if they're not, there's guys who are just such soy boys that they have no spine and they will never stand up to any feminist dogma. They will never stand up for anything. They will just go the path of least resistance. Do you know what I'm saying? These kind of guys study that as well.
Yeah, that's so that's one of those things where it's like, how do you reform those professions so that they're not like, even if they do naturally attract these types of people, like how do you, you know, fix or sort of massage that into not being, you know, pure poison?
Go back in time and stop the printing press from being invented.
No, it's just that we simply reverse the industrial revolution and its consequences.
I was thinking, you know, at least with regards to the politics stuff, because it's the same sort of thing. It's like, you know, you've got childless people like Merkel running these things. I think we'd be significantly better off if we said, you know, requirement for either being a politician or say being allowed to vote was being married with children, because those people, those are the only people who have skin in the game long term.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I wonder if policy could really do it. I think we just need to get back to a cultural space where that sort of thing would be expected. And I know that sounds kind of wishy-washy, and I'm not saying policy shouldn't necessarily be introduced, but, you know, like if we had a political culture like, say, the Roman Republic, where you had to serve in the army and conquer land for Rome to actually be a politician. I mean, not literally that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you need to perform a proper service to the country. Because if you look at the people in Parliament today, I mean, it's been said that parliaments have always been like this, but they're like professional middle class. They're lawyers and business people and all these just this cabal of bugmen. It's like we're ruled by a fucking human resources department. You know, it's like
actually it was I think in the 1980s or late 70s there was a switch in in the American Senate and Congress when people who had a military background became the minority of representatives. And ever since then, they've become a smaller and smaller amount of representatives. And it's been mainly dominated by people who study law and other, you know, bugman professions. And
that's absolutely true.
It's awful. And it's awful. Like
either party are ex-military. Like Jim Webb was the last decent white guy to be a Democrat, and he was like, you know, served in Nam. He's got his, you know, Vietnamese war bride and all the rest of that. And then one of the best senators on the Republican side is Tom Cotton, who is also a veteran. He's like the hardest core on immigration and all the rest of that. Those are the sort of people we need in charge of the stuff.
It's the removal of a proper core of people who are, as you say, invested in the society, and also like its most upstanding elements, the people that will risk their lives for the defense of the nation. And like that's such a contradiction in terms where you see women in politics. It's like, what?
Oh my God. No, service guarantee citizenship. Do you want to learn more?
Yeah. It's absurd.
Yeah, no,
it's just farce, isn't it?
Yeah, it is terrible. I don't know if any of you guys listen to like the Revolutions podcast series, but you know, if you haven't, you know, I'd say listen to the one on the French Revolution, but that one's really long, so maybe just do the 1848 ones.
You could do a series on the French Revolutions.
You should.
Well, Mike Duncan's got the Revolutions podcast, and so he's done a series on the French Revolution, which was really long but really good. And then there's another one on 1848, which is shorter.
Drop a link in chat.
Sure, I'll find it. It'll be just a second. But basically, like, looking at those with like modern, you know, our lens, you can sort of see where the problems we see today, you know, initially came from, and how like things basically haven't changed, even if, you know, nationalism is no longer like the left-wing ideology. But it's the sort of people who were the liberal nationalists of the 1840s are basically became the sort of neoliberal center-left people of today. It's the same class of people, and the motivations behind their ideology is actually pretty similar. It was, you know, the nationalism was seen as this sort of egalitarian, equal rights for all people of this group. The only sort of chauvinistic element of them was either, you know, autistic LARPing about their ancient borders before Rome or whatever, or, you know, Magyars demanding that everyone spoke their Hungarian gobbledygook language.
Yeah.
So, you know, those were like both really good though. I think everyone would benefit from a better understanding of all the history of this stuff, even if Mike Duncan isn't like our guy.
The French Revolution, a lot of bad stuff can be traced to that.
Oh my God, so much. And, you know, honestly, listening to all of it made me like sympathize with monarchists a lot more, even though I'm not going to be like going full NRX or anything. But, you know, looking back at how badly everything went at that point, it's like, you know, you can see how like a really old style divine right monarch could be, you know, serve as a counterweight to this group of people who really just wanted to be in, you know, were really just doing anything they could to be involved in politics.
It was sort of a revolution. It wasn't against a feudal monarchy. This is important to point out.
Yes.
By that time, the Enlightenment idea of absolutism had really taken hold in France, like ever since the Sun King, Louis XIV, and the Ancien regime had, like, you know, really started going hard on absolutism, and it was a rebellion against that, I'd say. It's often there's often this mischaracterization of feudal monarchy as if it's the same as absolute monarchy, when it's not at all.
Yeah,
I definitely recommend Thomas Carlyle's French Revolution history.
Oh my God, yes.
And Carlyle just all over. It's hilarious that John Stuart Mill and he were friends.
No,
agreeing on anything.
You need a Sun King to or something similar to
really
keep the church from degenerates and women. Imagine being so cocked that you want an Italo mutt who kisses feet and worships bread to be your head of church. Whoosh. I wouldn't be in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, the church, it's interesting that the function that the church has performed in society. I mean, for a while it was, you know, it was kind of a unique thing that Europe devised, so you could deposit money when you died. You could send your, you know, if you didn't have heirs, then it would default on the church, so the church grew very wealthy. But at the same time, it was also a place for you to send your second sons, right? So you could try and avoid having like a succession crisis where you're like your second son wants to inherit your stuff as well. And as a result, there has been a sort of clerical class that has emerged of people, you know, in Europe throughout the time, which has, I mean, I had one person tell me that the modern bugmen are like descended from the old clerical class in some sense, because they're often sort of like the second son who doesn't inherit the property but has this sort of role, you know, in society still. Make of that what you will, lads. I mean, I'm just putting it out there.
You know, I can see like the same sort of people who became clerics became that, but like part of the problem in Western Europe was that the priests couldn't get married, which is why they're, you know, full of fags, basically. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think Puritans are now SJWs. That's a very
that's absolutely, that's 100% true.
I think that's completely true. That's just a radical adherence to modern dogma, whatever that happens to be. Like, if it's Puritanism,
I mean, it's literally the same sort of people. It's the same people from northeastern, you know, New England. Those are that's where you find like the absolute. That is the only block in the country outside of California where the majority of white people vote Democrat.
I think it's interesting to note that when the Reformation happened, it basically expressed itself in different ways depending on the character of the peoples it spread amongst. For example, with the Dutch, they became extremely autistic. With the most Germans, they became a hell of a lot more devoted to God. And with the Anglos, they became Puritans and just went on a crusade to destroy all things that are good in the world.
I'm pretty sure the Puritans aren't actually Anglos, though. They descended from Germans.
Are you sure about that?
There's
like Puritanism sounds absolute cancer tier to me when I read about it.
Puritanism
it's just autistic enough to be German.
I think there's a strain of sorry, I just got tagged on Twitter with druid witch stabbed by neighbor angry at his noisy pagan ritual. And then someone's tagged me saying, Horatio Carey, you all right, mate? Sorry. But yeah, it's complicated. I think I won't deny that there is a strain within the English that does express these things, which I find distasteful, but I do think it is a manifestation of that same German autism. It's just, it also happens, we thankfully.
How dare you try and take Puritanism away from us?
We thankfully, dude, you can fucking have it. Jesus Christ. We thankfully managed to offload a lot of our radical Puritans to the States, and I think they continued their retardation there as well.
To be fair, I think everybody just about did. Everybody sent their crazy
that's true.
autistic
You sent
cults to the
your
United States.
Anabaptists, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
If only you guys had just taken care of those guys when you had the chance. Honestly, why do you have to be so lazy?
Well, I mean,
it's a new world.
As Vog said,
we never thought you'd amount to anything.
As Vog said, so Mr. American Richard Spencer type. No, America was where we sent the crap of Europe. It's not where the pioneers went. It's where Norway would round up drunks and thieves, and we would dump them on a boat, and they would go to America. So
America confirmed for Europe's Australia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, yeah. People say Australians are descended from criminals, but there were lots of penal colonies in America as well. Lots and lots. I think Virginia was originally
lots of Irish slaves.
Oh, God.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
No, it's funny when you talk about the different versions of the Reformation, because when you look at like Anglicanism, it was basically just like, we want to be Catholic except without the Pope. And that was the extent of it, except for like the Scottish decided to counter signal the English on everything again. Yeah. And you said we should get rid of bishops entirely, and as well as the rest of the hierarchy, which was just like, okay. I mean, they probably would have turned into like our Southern Baptists within like a century if they had been allowed to do that unimpeded.
Anglican Catholic is the tradition I was brought up in, and it is literally just Catholicism sans the Bishop of Rome,
Yeah, and so that one's pretty nice, like all things considered. It's a shame that it's so utterly cucked.
I mean, it's cucked as hell, but I love the tradition around it. We have like incense, and the services are all kind of,
it's gorgeous. No, like every time
ritual, and it's lovely. It's just
when I look up like songs for various religious songs like that are actually in English, it's always some Anglican choir that's doing the singing, and it's always lovely.
Yeah, there's a lot to like there, but I like it for its Englishness, not for its Christianity.
Yeah, I will say at least the two I wanted to at least mention. The one thing that always gets brought up is the sort of Jew worship thing, which is entirely a Southern American Protestant invention because they're too stupid to understand what supersessionism is, which is replacement theology.
They're comparable to Ulster boys in Europe, basically.
It's basically
very low IQ, very like low church.
They're terrible. But the basic gist of that is, and this is something shared by Roman Catholicism and a bunch of other Protestants, is that basically Jews don't count as Israel anymore. Essentially, I can't remember the specific verse where that's spelled out, but basically, it's not that like we was the real Jews, but rather that they're no longer God's chosen people, basically, and followers of Christ are.
Still, I just can't abide it. I can't abide wanting to fucking like take up the mantle of the Semites, like wanting to be the chosen of Yahweh after them. Like, we have our own thing. Why do we need to just become the chosen people of this foreign desert deity? I don't understand. Like, I don't fundamentally understand why that's better than our own tradition.
Read the Bible, not Siege. Read the Bible, dude.
Oh my god, I have not read Siege, dude.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about Siege. I'm talking about you profess that like this is universal truth. Like, but I don't know, man. I'm just kind of. I just don't understand it, and I know I won't, so it's probably not profitable to talk.
Yeah, we're not. We probably shouldn't be trying to convert you here. It's just I'm just putting out supersessionism for anyone listening, so that they know to look that up next time someone says, you worship Jews. It's like, no, that's just Southerners. That's just those people.
Well, you don't convert people by trying to use reason and arguments. You crucify a few of them, you destroy their altars, and then you force.
Exactly. Right. Thank you. That's the biggest red pill we've had on today. You just,
Germans.
it's threats of violence in the end that back up all logic.
Politics is nothing but organized violence.
Yes.
Well,
Exactly.
this was great part about 1848 is the realization after like a month into the revolution where all the conservative factions realized, wait a second, politics doesn't actually rest on these, this small gang of lunatics in my capital city who are rioting and burning stuff and making speeches about rights of man. No, the only thing that matters is that the army is personally loyal to me, and they're going to shoot all these bastards if they try to, step out of line. And so they would go and do that. They'd march the army in, they'd level Vienna, they'd level Berlin, they'd shoot all these people, and then it's like, oh, it was that easy.
Sovereignty is the organized means of violence, or the exclusive legitimated right to the use of violence within an equality.
So
but the legitimacy is ultimately self-derived, or it's derived from respect from other polities, but ultimately
the legitimacy is just sort of a weasel word there to exclude like mafias and such. But
there's no inherent, I mean, you could say to find right of kings or something, but there's nothing inherent to any polity that gives it more legitimacy. Ultimately,
no, it's only if people believe it's legitimate that legitimacy matters. It's the same thing with like human rights. They don't exist or mean anything unless someone is out enforcing them.
Yeah, well, that's a very materialist view. I think that the divine right of kings is totally justified, though. Hold on.
No,
what are you saying?
Let's speaking of crazy people, I wanted to talk a bit about the Anabaptists in the 1500s. Now, I thought about this a lot, that back in the old days they didn't really have politics like we have today. They didn't have pluralism in the scene of politics, but they did have different expressions of Christianity and heresies, if you'd like. And you can draw, some would say it's anachronistic to do so, but I still like to imagine that some of the things we see today in what we would call Argives and Marxists, you can see that sort of mirrored as well in in parts of certain Christian heresies, where you can see strains of what could resemble modern day feminism expressed in the 15th or 13th century, or equality for all, like when it comes to distribution of means. For example, the peasant revolts in Germany in the 1500s was led by a preacher who basically used the teaching of the Reformation to demand the destruction of hierarchies and the redistribution of wealth, land, and property as equally as possible amongst all men. And Marx as well, and many Marxists tend to point to this guy whose name I can't remember for the love of me, as a proto-Marxist, essentially. You can say
I think
that
I've heard of that.
some of these heresies are basically just what you could imagine as the expression of the left wing as soy boys in the 15th and 16th century. And I would argue that the Anabaptists were people like these. They were, characterized by their loathing of hierarchy. They didn't like bishops. They didn't like that people were in command and control. They were they thought that systems inherently corrupted, and we should all just like be humans, man.
That was my complaint Protestant earlier, is that it was the sort of we're abolishing the hierarchy, and it's your personal relationship with God stuff. And this is, I think, because like the early like Lutherans and Calvinists were significantly more theocratic and organized than later were, but I think they lacked the sort of easy inherent justification that like the tradition and of the papacy had, which made it just so much easier for things to break down and fracture like that into this super egalitarian mindset.
Well, the idea that it's about the book alone, that opens the door. I don't think we said this earlier, but that opens the door to anyone looking at the book and reading whatever they want from it. So there's no prestige to your ability to, or your right to read the material.
I mean, there were heresies before the Protestant Reformation as well. I mean, there were like several Gnostic heresies as well, and
those keep coming.
Catharism was completely like shit tier, and it was very good that they were stamped out. but
extremely gay.
but Protestantism, as in Lutheranism, is very, strong, and it's it's the legitimate word of God in its purest form. So it's a reason it has survived all the challenges that papists have thrown its way.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I wasn't clear. Blitz, you are actually Lutheran?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. 'Cause I don't think I ever heard you actually like say that. I just kind of assumed you were, though.
Yeah, it's easy to assume though. If you're a right wing sort of identitarian in Finland, can be can.
Unless you're
I've not met a single pagan here. I'm sorry,
Barbute's
except for Barbute, but it's like he's the exception to the rule. I don't think there's actual
He's
real.
also the most intelligent person I've met on the internet. So
It's true though. He is.
One of.
Which, but he's just he's a man of contradictions, so to say.
Yeah,
Kind
one
of
thing
is,
is,
yeah.
He's a Savonian, yet he's intelligent. He's Finnish, yet he's pagan.
one thing that strikes me is, I mean, this may just be because we don't actually know any Greeks or Italians, but when it comes to paganism and a pagan tradition, like those are the two that we have the most documentation and the biggest, the most stories, the most interesting stuff about them. But I don't know of anyone who's like legitimately trying to revive worshiping Zeus or Jupiter. It's pretty much all some variant of like Germanic paganism, and even in like the Slavs,
they do exist. They do exist.
They exist.
There's small Greek groups. I think there's a small group of within Golden Dawn who worships.
Are there?
Zeus. Yeah, and Casa Pound has a subsect.
No kidding.
I know a Brazilian who worships ancient Iberian gods.
Oh, that's old school. I was gonna say, because one of the things is I was looking at the
actually wait. I think sorry to interrupt, but I think he actually like worships like Punic Carthaginian deities.
Oh my god!
Which
those
is
are
Does he sacrifice?
Wow.
Does he sacrifice children? Yeah.
I mean,
Does he sacrifice children to a? Does he sacrifice children to a brass bull or what?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but
there's always gonna be these fucking people who will say that, insert current religious order here is so cucked, man. We should go back to the old ways. It was probably back in the pagan days these people existed, and they would think that Odin and insert whatever pagan deity is so cucked, and it's foreign because it comes from the neighboring village.
No, Romans literally did this about like the importation of Greek stuff.
Back then, like so. Pagans don't deny the like truth of foreign religion in a sense.
That's true.
Like, this is our thing and that's their thing in a way. Yeah. So it's real. It's just that they don't hold power here, if that makes sense. So when the Romans came to Britain, there was a water god called Sulis. The town of Bath was called Aquae Sulis because it was like there was a sacred shrine there. The Romans built a bath on top of it in the sacred water, and the Romans adopted the Romans that came adopted the local gods. It's like it was much more tied to the land, and in that sense, like you can't pinpoint one time where the pre-Indo-Europeans just instantly adopted in the Indo-European way of doing things. It's a lot more fluid and less sort of. I don't want to say autistic again, but you know what I'm saying. It's not that, it's not like Abrahamism in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I was going to.
So I think like somebody saying, "Oh, Odin is so cucked. Why can't we go back to Ugala Bugala or whatever the fuck we used to worship?"
Trees and rocks, and
I think that's anachronistic, and it's seeing.
It strikes the point that there's always going to be people who can't, as a normal person, as a normie would be part of society and be part of the in-group tribe, and instead has to seek something because it's novel and it makes them feel special.
Sure, those exist. I only brought up the pagan stuff because I was just thinking of like one of the guys who runs the Azov battalion is into like Mithraism, and I'm thinking, it's like apparently there's right. It's like there isn't he apparently doesn't know enough Slavic paganism to be a Slavic pagan. He's got to adopt, some a different Middle Eastern cult. to be, sufficiently edgy.
I mean, Iranians are. Well,
Yeah, I know.
Indo-Europeans,
They're not.
Aryans. But I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, but yeah, it's a lot more fluid. It's complicated. It's kind of complicated, but I don't know. It's I also think it's quite a personal thing for a lot of people, and this makes it sound like, oh, I'm spiritual, like annoying white people who are Buddhists. But I think there is it's complicated.
Yeah, no, well, it's again, it's too bad that you're on here and not someone more, insane and frothing at the mouth, because we're all really
fucking Christ, cocksucker. I worship Odin.
Yes, no, exactly. It's the the real people we're directing all of this against. The actual shitposting event would be us going onto the 50 forum and starting another thread on religion because
can we do that? Can we?
Oh, I'm sure you
start
could.
Minefield.
Yeah.
Can we start like European rating groups?
Did you see the latest reading from the 50 forum where they got extremely butthurt again that we don't call ourselves white people and white nationalists? It's like we Europeans not wanting to adopt our terminology. We're all gonna lose if you don't.
Why don't you think like us enlightened big brain Americans?
It's ridiculous. It's like why won't you just become Americans?
I come from a pure line of Irish, German, Italian, Swiss, French, Swedish, Austrian, and Antarctican ancestry.
It's like it's hard to explain this to them that your ethnicity is white, my ethnicity is Finnish.
Are we doing this again? Oh, this should be fun.
Yeah.
Something we can all agree on.
It's like Faust. You're Dutch. You're not white. And
Germanic.
Horatio,
I'm Germanic. God damn it.
Yeah, and Horatio, you're an eternal Anglo who hates all life and good things. You're not white, and you can't ask Europeans to
take issue with the second bit, but sure.
Yeah, it's still like ridiculous because we help each other. It's a really good post on the 50 forum. Somebody posted it that European nationalists actually meme together and work together in these meme wars on Twitter a lot more than American nationalists ever care. They don't care about any of these meme efforts on Twitter.
I actually would like to make a serious point about that, because back when we had Dutch and the French elections, I actually tried to get the Americans mobilized to meme online, to talk about it, that sort of thing, and I just got nothing. I proposed some articles to Andrew Anglin, nothing. These guys always talk about, you should cooperate, you should abandon your identities and become white nationalists, because that promotes cooperation. I'm like, bitch, when I ask you to cooperate on anything, you don't do it.
Exactly.
It's also not realistic, or like there's no depth to it. Like, what poetry or songs or music or literature am I going to read and say, this is white? I really identify with all this white culture I'm reading.
Yeah.
Right now. Fuck that. No. I celebrate English and British culture, and I can read something from Germany or whatever the fuck, but like there's a unique connection that I have to the English canon and the English culture that I can't achieve for anyone else, and no one else can achieve, compared to an Englishman. And that's not something. I mean, the Americans do have like a culture that's unique to America, but they need to fucking embrace that instead of trying to say I'm white.
Well, you can see some of that with the sort of rebranding. You can see some of that with the half-hearted attempt to rebrand to American nationalism as opposed to something else. But I mean, it depends. Me personally, definitely Ukrainian, Dutch, English, and not even sure because of adoptions. It's like I theorized to be Portuguese, also Native American, and all the rest of these things. So it's like. I represent everyone on the panel, but Blitz, essentially.
I think like
you could just leave.
I think that I've heard the term Americana, and I don't know if that's going to like take
off.
Yeah, no, I can't remember who came up with that.
Genesis that happened in South Africa, right? They became the Boers. They homogenized into one group, although the English kind of stayed apart from that in South Africa.
I'm pretty sure Amerikaner is just a Midwestern term for Volksdeutsche, though.
Well, in a sense, but I mean, but there, I think there's maybe numerous European ethnicities in America that have conglomerated. You have like the Appalachians are kind of one thing with their Scotch-Irish ancestry, and then you have the New Englanders and stuff. But
yeah, no, it's funny because those are the people who most identify on like the census as ethnically American as opposed to like German or anything else.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if you can salvage one ethnicity for like 200 odd million white Americans, but at the same time, like finding something organic, I think it goes in tandem with this idea I was talking about earlier of organic communities where you don't move like once every year for work and stuff. Like having this ethnogenesis, this homogenization into something recognizable and like a tradition, I think that's the healthy way nationalism is sustained, and I think it's a far more deep thing than just saying I fight for Europa,
Yeah.
No, I think the only thing that's important, I think I've made this point before in like emails to you guys, is I think, basically because we are the military power that props up this entire global system, and we're, because we have that position, until we're, uncucked, basically like all the rest of you guys are going to really struggle to uncuck yourselves. Like just look at like the island of Malta, for instance, basically Catholic theocracy up until extremely recently. And the only reason that they changed was because of pressure from, everyone else. They couldn't go it alone being, super Catholic, because everyone else had too much influence in their area, and they just couldn't, culturally isolate themselves from the, everyone else. And I think, a lot of you guys are going to be stuck in that sort of place where it's like, you'll be subject to influence, culturally and, more directly from the US. And that's really the only reason that you have to concern yourselves with what we're doing, basically. I don't think you can completely uncuff yourselves without us also, at least being willing to let you guys go. You know what I mean?
I beg to differ, American. Just watch us. You'll be coming begging to us to uncuck your country soon enough, and then we'll say, dude, it's easy. Just become Finnish nationalists, bro. Just start just calling yourself Finnish nationalists. Then that'll solve everything. Then we'll work together.
Just be yourself.
Yeah, except for when it comes to nationalism.
You have to become who you are, You have to become who you are.
You need to become who you are.
I don't think Spencer even realizes that that's what he's saying when he says that. Like I think he's managed to like warp this into meaning something a lot more than it does, and he actually like buys into it. It's so ridiculous.
I don't know. I like the message. I like the message.
I don't think it. I mean, it isn't actually like in and of itself ridiculous, but clearly, just be yourself isn't that inspiring.
The issue there is that Spencer advocates become who you are, and then he turns around and he's like, we have to start a white space imperium, and the EU is great, and we have to unify all European nationalities. And it's like, doesn't that kind of run against what you just said before there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's a valid critique. Like, I think becoming who I am means embracing English folk culture, It's rejecting the degeneracy for what we already have. And that's not to say it's like, it's like not fluid at all, or it's never going to change. But it's being part of a continuum and something that stretches back and in front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. The thing is, I don't know that Spencer is actually serious. I mean, he acts like he is, but it's so hard to take him that seriously at anything beyond, it's like it's okay to take your own side type stuff. It's like anytime he, steps beyond that, it's all just this sort of ridiculous nonsense that, even if we were to like make the first step of being able to take our own side, it would be like, this is just irrelevant stuff, like the space imperium stuff. It's like, who cares? There's so many other things to actually solve before we think about, we need to go conquer space. It's like, I don't think he can conceive of the world outside of this sort of ivory towers type shit.
He read Nietzsche once, and since then he's just he thinks he's the prophet from Zarathustra in the wilds, preaching to society how they should live. I think that's generally how he sees it. I think
you're a bit unfair on him there, but I'd say we should try and create a good, healthy, and prosperous lifestyle for our peoples before we go into space. Certainly, got a perfectly good planet here. You know, we need to care for it.
Yeah, exactly. No, and you know, it certainly ties into the paganism. You can certainly justify that from a Christian perspective and all the rest of that. So I think that's something we can agree on. Yeah. And I think it can go back to the sort of issue with what sort of people become politicians. It is people like him. It's people who, you know, they are smart, but they can't. But there is some psychology study on this actually, which is, you know, one of the few legitimate ones that I think managed to replicate successfully. But it's like, people who are very smart can't actually understand people who aren't as smart as them. And it's not, you know, and it's in the sense like they can't understand like what sort of stumbling blocks or issues they'd have. And this is why
implying Spencer smart.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like, you know, it's like people who, it's like social liberalism. It's like, you know, the people who were hippies in the 70s became neocons today, but like poor people who try to do what the hippies suggested in the 70s became meth addicts with 3-4 kids by 3 different women. It's like the rich people, you know, advocate for this social liberalism, but they can't even comprehend that like normal people, that like this would ruin the lives of normal people who don't have the same sort of right. But they can't, you know, normal people don't have the same sort of access to resources. They don't know systems inside and out. They don't have the same sort of connection. So it's like they need to follow, you know, a socially conservative lifestyle in order to succeed. And it's like, the people who run the country don't realize that. It's like when you go to like all of the quote unquote conservatives are actually socially liberal because they all come from the upper class, but they have to, you know, they feel compelled to, you know, mouth platitudes about it because that's what they have to do to get elected. And so they're completely useless on this front because in all reality, they're just libertarians. They really only care about getting elected to, you know, pay less so that they don't have to pay as much in taxes. And that's all there is to them. It's the same with your Tory party. It's those sorts of people.
All right, lads, I'm going to take off here. This has been a good conversation.
All right.
Let's get rid of the pagan.
All right. The
Two birds, one stone. Pagan and Anglo free in 1 second.
I'm still 1/8 English, so you're not completely free of Anglos.
I'm 1/8. I'm white, you guys.
I'm white, you guys. All right, fellas.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
All right. See you around there, show. All right. So, shall we invite people in from the chat to debate?
Yeah. Southern Dingo is PMing right now. He says, "I'm so fucking triggered right now. I'd really like to come on to talk about this."
Yeah, sure. Let's have it. And there's that, and there's some massive Spurg fight going on between the Dutch in the stream as well.
Yeah, I don't read the live chat. It's all in Dutch to me. Yeah. Thank you for pulling in. You know, we see Dutch people in chat. They're not sending their best.
How would you even know? Well, actually, you're right. But how would you know?
No.
Oh my God! They literally are all speaking Dutch. Jesus.
He wants to come and talk about a white identity and how we all have to identify with an American ethnicity.
All right, let's have this for the 1488th time. Then let's do it again.
Do you want to do this again? Oh boy! All right,
let's do it again.
Let's send him an invite link.
Yeah. Then we have to like imprint it on clay tablets and send them with him, and then he can't come back.
This is see here. All right, Dingo, I PM'd you an invite link to the chat. If you're still listening, you can come on. See if he takes the bait. Otherwise, I was expecting to talk about a lot more about religion, but it's sort of spiraled.
Derailed, yeah.
Yeah, he just wasn't, you know, our pagan just wasn't autistic and combative enough to really, because he was just conceding all of our points to us.
Well,
we can do, you know, I like Christianity. You're so good. It's all fine.
And
you're
not American enough to counter with, "You're going to hell, you fucking pagan. Now read the Bible."
Yeah. Well, we could do some anti-popery posting since you're Catholic.
Yes. Fuck the Pope.
I'll just shapeshift into being an Orthodox, because I'm actually Greek Catholic anyways. So, you know, we're only pretending to be Catholic. We just, you know, we otherwise act exactly like Orthodox.
Good stuff. No, what's the what is it? Like I've heard Americans say that in America they don't see Catholics as Christians. And
Yes,
they
no,
just believe.
the common refrain you can find in Texas is, yes, we have freedom of religion here, both kinds, Catholic and Christian. they literally say that, like, unironically. So there's definitely a lot of people, like, there are people here who legitimately, like, don't realize that, like, Catholics believe in Christ, like, at all. Like,
Wow.
there are really people here who just like you take them to, like, Catholic church once and they're like, oh my God, like, you almost act like Christians. Like, they're completely shocked.
Well, actually, I want to discuss the interesting, pretty based religious culture you do have in the United States, like the Amish, who are basically like if VAR got it to organize a society.
Yeah, but
And
they're
the
just
Mormons.
the Amish are technically just parasites because they live off the protection of the other. They refuse to participate in society. They create their own, and then they refuse to defend themselves. Technically, because they do not engage in any violence. They're complete pacifists. So why would you want to have any like anything to do with the Amish? Because they would never like extend the favor to you.
No, well, I mean, they do at least, produce furniture for us. That's pretty nice, I guess. I don't know.
All right.
And white babies.
We'll
They
say
produce
that
white
it
kids.
stops at
And they
the furniture.
also-
Wow.
And they're also evangelizing for the Dutch culture and the Dutch Germanic culture because they speak Plattdeutsch, and they maintain our culture in the United States.
Well, what a great heritage, you guys. At least the
They're
Finns
like-
in America are trying to create something called like state superior.
Yeah.
So I would say we're pretty.
You know how many Amish there are, though? There's like 400,000 Amish there. It's pretty good.
Wow. Okay, I thought there was.
And they're
gonna be
pretty much
more.
like all in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
No, they're
Yeah, no,
spreading
they-
out to the other states.
Oh, are they
Hey,
really?
can I welcome Dingo on the show? Just joined us here. Hello, Dingo. Welcome.
Hey man,
Good.
I hope there's not any background noise. I'm in a work truck right now.
No, it sounds fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right. Yes. So I was flipping my shit in my truck, dude. I was like, these motherfuckers. You
All
guys
right.
just don't want to be white, do you?
No, we don't. We're not
No.
American. I'm sorry.
Okay. I understand that you've been through this a million times. I think we did it for an hour and a half on whenever you were on my show.
Yeah.
But
What
they're
is
not
your
mutually
show?
exclusive.
Yeah, but
No, it's better you don't know. I like to remain irrelevant.
why can't you just let us be what we choose to identify as? Why is this such a big why is this such a big
You
pain in your
want to
ass?
identify as a woman? You want to identify as a woman while you're at it? You are what you are.
Don't strawman me. Don't strawman me, man. You know I am what I am. I'm a Finn.
Yes,
Right.
you can. They're not mutually exclusive. Finns are white, right? Greeks.
Why does this like bother Americans so much that we don't call ourselves white nationalists?
No,
I think-
I don't want you to call yourself a white nationalist.
Then what about just not calling ourselves white?
Well, then you're just denying reality.
And
No, I
what
think
does
we're
that
not
bother
white.
you?
I think the distinction is it's basically like Finn is like an ethnicity is a subset of a race. I think is what what Dingo is going for here.
Yeah.
And so it's like
it's
you
pretty
are
simple.
Finnish, but like it's like you are Finnish, and that is a subset of white. But like I am white, but I can't really identify as a subset of white because I'm too mixed.
And
So it's like it only-
I'm just gonna
Well,
say
like-
that Europeans who have an ethnicity and a race, and we always will choose our ethnicity over our race.
Yeah, that's fine. But I'm just saying But if you say I'm not white, and then say, well, I'm choosing my ethnicity over my race, and we can have both. Which one is it?
Oh, of course, when I say I'm not white, I say that I don't describe myself as that because I describe myself as a Finn. Of course, I am white, but I don't identify as white.
There's no meaning to the whole idea of whiteness unless you're in a racial conflict with other groups who aren't.
Exactly. That's the point. I mean, I think it was Phineas that said this. last time. He said that these identities are forged through adversity, and we have a common enemy here, right? And it's the non-whites. You can say what you want about what is white, and I'm not white or whatever, but we've got Mexicans destroying our country along with some Muslims and Negroes. You've got Negroes and Muslims as your main problem, but these are all distinctively not white people. And I look in history, and what I see is like a bunch of Navajos and whatever, all these other Indian tribes who hated each other to the point where they refused to work with each other to fight the white man. And now look at them. Now they're all interbred, alcoholic pieces of shit living under our roof. I mean, and I don't want us to be the next stupid squaw featherheads. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these identities matter. I mean, these little things matter on a big level. And you just refuse to acknowledge it.
I said this. I countered this exact same argument last time, and I really am disappointed that you didn't listen. So now just listen to me this time and actually try to remember this. All right?
Okay, Dad. Go ahead.
We're talking about a common struggle, right? And in each and every single European country, there's their own struggle, and everyone is forging their own story right now. There's not going to be talk about the European struggle against replacement in 100 years. The Hungarians are going to talk about how they overcame their adversities, and the Germans will talk about how they solved their problem. And right now, every ethnicity is fighting its own battle right now for their own country.
Okay, all right. Well, I would ask you this. Let's say let's go ahead.
That's just that's why we're not gonna become a white a group like that. We're still gonna, even though we're fighting the same enemy, we're all doing it in our own territory at the same time.
Besides that, it's logistically and culturally very, very difficult and even implausible for us to work together. I mean, I can work with Germans and maybe I can work with Scandinavians, but for example, French are completely culturally isolated and only speak their own language. How are you going to even reach them? How are you going to logistically support them?
Well, I mean, I think it'd be a lot easier, than letting all these brown people in your country. I mean, a lot of white people seem to be willing to work with them, but I would ask you this. All right, if you think these identities mean nothing, I would throw an example at you to try to counter that. And maybe I'm retarded like the rest of us burgers, but I don't think I am. I think you're wrong. I think I'm smarter than you, and I'll tell you why. Let's say Finland, all the Finns work together, and they cast all of these people out of their country. Well, and okay, maybe I'm not smarter than you. What's next door to Finland?
Sweden, Russia.
Okay, let's say you cast them into Sweden and Russia. Oh, you win. Finland's white again. How long before they cross the border again and do the same thing? They need to be kicked out of Europe.
Implying they're going to get out alive anywhere.
Implying that, this being the problem, we can might as well argue for European nationalists to identify as humans, because we're all humans. But it's not going to happen. What I'm saying over and over and over again is that you can't enforce an identity. It just grows naturally, and then you have to work with that.
Yeah, and I think, to Dingo, I mean, the people who are identifying as Finnish nationalists and whatever are pretty much universally willing to work with other European nationalists in, advancing a sort of general cause. Like, the Finns aren't going to just completely, I don't, here on this show, we've got a bunch of people who are talking about a bunch of other Europeans and expressing some sort of concern for how things work out for them. The level of cooperation, I think there's still going to be cooperation, even if it's not sort of, based on, we're all, yeah. I mean, the only issue, there are going to be issues like, I know a Polish guy who wants to reinstate the Commonwealth and annex all of my country and doesn't think my identity is at all, that Ukrainians or Belarusians legitimately exist. Now, I'd agree that Belarusians don't exist, but I'd contest that Ukrainians do in fact exist. I don't know.
According to Spencer.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Spencer's.
Yeah, but
Name one thing. Just please name one thing Richard Spencer's ever done wrong. I'll wait. I'm just playing.
Phalanx. Phalanx. I'd argue leaving Radix. Abandoning alternativerght.com. doing that interview with Vice where he's drunkenly talking about a white space imperium. There's probably a bunch more that I can't think of right now.
Tailgate was literally the worst thing he could
my
have done.
favorite part was when he was drunk on a video very recently, like last week, and we was begging for money, and he was so drunk he wished everyone a Merry Christmas at the end in May. It's like he became who he is, and he just forges his own will, and he also forges his own dates of the calendar. He goes beyond.
Yeah, it'd be easier to name the times that he's not drunk. That
True.
It'd be a lot less.
Yeah.
Hey guys, you need to fund my defense fund so that I can buy more bourbon. Merry Christmas.
Also, are you gonna bring your wife to the after party? That'd be sweet.
Yeah.
Hey, at least he hasn't broken the cockbox. We can see. Here's that going for him, right?
Yeah. Cockbox was an inside job.
I did want to ask you another question whenever I got to talk to you, Blitz, and we were DMing the other day because Blitz and I are best friends. Everybody listening, best friends.
Yeah.
We talk all the time, and
we do.
We were talking about whenever he jumped all down the throat of this nice old man named Alfred Schaefer, and we kind of got into why that happened, but basically he said one thing that really caught my attention, and you said something about talking about Jews and the history of the Holocaust, which people aren't ready for, right? And what I would ask you, because I see this horrible future of like this pattern repeating, and over a couple hundred years, we're a less and less percent of the population, and because in South Africa, they're extremely cucked, right? They're more cucked now than they were 10 years ago, and whatever. The lesser they get, the more cucked they become because they're surrounded more, and so they're definitely not ready to hear about Jews, right? So I'm not sure. I would like for you to describe to me a point when they will be ready to hear the truth, because I believe that without the actual truth, they're not going to wake up. They're going to keep doing this Republican, civic nationalist type stuff.
All right. Let me tackle that.
Hold on. The time will be when we have converted to Islam. We have to convert all of Europe to Islam. It's like we don't do white identity, right? We just all convert to Islam, and then we have a united identity, and then we already have a reason to hate the Jews because it's already in the Quran.
Well, as long as we're all on the same team, that's fine.
Let me. I think that for most of us guys, we think it's a pretty easy red pill by now to swallow. That hey, historically Jews have always been like this. Historically Jews have always been extremely progressive and generally expressed anti-white sentiment, anti-Christian sentiment, and have worked against their interests. Right now, here's another red pill for you to swallow, which might be even harder, and that is that yelling the truth about the Jews isn't a novel idea, and it's not a novel strategy. It's nothing that we haven't done before. Rockwell did it, and he didn't save America. We had the skinheads did it, and they didn't save anybody. We've had lots of these kinds of people who believe genuinely that the truth is our greatest weapon, and if we just rigorously stick to this very dogmatic approach in propaganda, then the masses will wake up when they hear the truth. And I don't believe that, because we have, we can definitely look at history. We can see all these right-wing outfits, right, who have done exactly this, and they've all failed. And then people on Twitter and 50 Forum say, well, real neat-sockism has never been tried before. And then if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, the masses will wake up. And the Fourth Reich will. It's completely ridiculous to me.
That's
you've had it in the Netherlands.
The NPD. Yeah, that's what got us the NPD. That's what got us all these tiny marginal skinhead parties that are just like laughing stocks used by the media to beat other nationalists with. Like here we have the NVU in Germany. It's the NPD. You could argue that TWP and Heimbach were that in the United States. Like if you go that route, you just become like a parody that the mainstream can use to ridicule actual, genuine, proper critiques.
Yeah, that sounds great, and like you make some great criticisms, right? But like what I don't think is fair is the Rockwell comparison. Rockwell was no laughing stock. You're way off on that, and they killed him because I would have to say he was doing the right thing, and that's the one thing you can't do. You can't wake up the goyim, and he was headed there. So I would say that's an example that would go in my favor, not yours. And then secondly, you say yelling about the Jews to the public. Yeah, that paints an image in people's heads of like these skinheads literally yelling with their hand up. I've never advocated for that. I don't want to yell at anybody.
No, but it's in practice what the guys on the Daily Show are doing on a weekly basis. It's just they're doing it publicly, just on the internet.
Yeah, I think the
it's a
best you
great.
can do is what the Ryan Falk alt hype. He's got some autistically long article that he recently put out on that, and that is pretty much, I think, the only sort of reasonable way that you could approach that with a normal person. I mean, normal in quotes. I mean, someone who's even at all receptive to one of our ideas is not really going to be normal anyways, but that is about as close as you can get to it. On the other hand, there are things that you can break through to people with very easily, because it's just a simple matter of observation, with racial differences, gender differences, that all of this pause is actually unhealthy. These are things that people can see with their own eyes very easily, and it's the sort of stuff that's subconscious. And I think if you break, if you can break through the conditioning there first, that is really the only sort of reasonable path to getting most people to the next step.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that whatsoever. And I would just keep pointing to the South Africa thing. Like, I don't know how bad it has to get, without talking about the truth, before we wake up. I don't see that point happening. Like, I see the South Africans getting less and less in number. The crimes are getting higher in number. They're getting worse. Like the 82-year-old woman who had her feet drilled into her floor a couple weeks ago. Like, these things aren't waking them up, right?
You do have a point with that.
Yeah, I mean, at what point do we wake up trying to tell them about trannies and gayness? They understand trannies and gayness are bad. They are willing to trade that off for peace. We have to let them know, hey, you will find no peace with Jews constantly doing this to you.
At this point, South Africa is only propped up by foreign countries who's exporting enough resources to the country for them to have sort of a Western civilization at all. I know if all of or even the majority of Western countries come even close to South Africa's demographics, then things would change, because there.
Yeah, I'd say part of the issue with South Africa in particular is that we already came together they already were, woke, and that we already came together and crushed them. It's like, what are they going to do if they try to rise up against it again?
When these people were, when apartheid ended and people tried to reinstitute, these rebels who were like woke on all the questions you promote, they formed their own civil guards and tried to reinforce apartheid illegally in certain areas. You saw these captured white resistance members begging for their lives on live television and then being gunned down by black state police troopers, murdered. That sent a very strong signal to the public of, who's in charge now, and it's, awful. You can't really compare the situation in South Africa, who's been, in a sense, violently subdued by foreigners, to Europe. Or even America, because
not yet.
Their history.
Yeah, the South African example is another reason why I think America is going to have to be uncucked first before all of you guys can make really substantial progress. I mean, like, not just in terms of getting, say, AFD or whoever elected, but like actually starting to like kick people out type stuff. Like,
I think it's the opposite. Like, I think that if you guys wait on America, you're going to be backing up. You don't need America.
Yeah, I agree with Dingo here.
I don't mean wait for us. I just mean, I think I think there's an upper limit on how much you can accomplish without us, letting
No. If anything, the United States will send troops to suppress any kind of ethno-nationalist revolt in Europe.
That's what I mean. Is the problem is that's why you need us to not to at least be willing to be uninvolved, like at a government level, just like.
Yeah. The best things have always, the best policy America has ever had, from a European perspective, is American isolationism, and I think it's
God, here we go.
for America and for Europe. Because when they stick to
Yeah.
their own devices, you know, we are much better off.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely Americans. You know, it's most definitely us white Americans. It has nothing to do with the fact that we have the second most Jews in the world. It's just us. You know, we want to come fuck with you. But no, to a serious point.
Dude, it's still like, you know, you can blame them as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's, you
There are
know,
too
it's
many
your
collaborators.
people who's pulling the bomb lever. It's your people who's pulling the trigger on why.
Now you sound like now you sound like Oliver from Brexit Party, and then that guy's a dirty, filthy hippie. Like why? This is my problem with you, Blitz.
Anti-American sentiment is very common in all European nationalists. It's not just
Yeah,
me.
it's not just that. I don't care if you're anti-American, but like whenever you skip around the Jew in the driver's seat, right? I have a problem with that because I know that you're
It's
smart
like
enough to know what's going on.
Some point you have to like see like where does Americans' agency begin? Like, how do you have any control over your country whatsoever? Or because I think the mindset is incredibly poisonous to think that you have no say whatsoever in what your government does. Why get a job? Why get a job? Because, you know, the Jews are just gonna throw you out.
I'll tell you why. I mean, because of the white people in America. Well, because white people in America are the only people who don't get to take advantage of the safety net that we provide. That's why I have to work. Trust me, I've thought about this till I'm blue in the face. But no, we don't have any control over our government, dude. None. Which is why I think telling people around me about the Jews in control and how they don't have any control either is a positive thing, not something that's going to hold us back, because doing it your way is how we're going to get held back. People will remain asleep. They want an excuse to not have to do anything. That is the natural state of people, at least white people, I believe. And that's what they're providing by telling them everything's fine. And that's what you're providing by saying like, oh, let's not talk about Jews. We need, you know, it's your fault. It's your agency. You can, I mean, then they'll think, oh, well, somebody else will do it for me. Well, nobody else is. And there's somebody who knows what's going on, and they're not afraid to talk about it. They call us anti-Semites and all this shit, so they're acknowledging they're different. But we have to pretend that they're just like us and we're all Americans. No, dude.
I'm saying the mindset is poisonous to think that the Jews control everything, because it leads to apathy. It leads to apathy, whereas you think that we can control our own country. And we in part do. That means I should do something in order to reach that goal. You know, I'm not like this 80 IQ guy in live chat who thinks I am being a Jew apologist here. I'm not.
Ignore that guy.
Nobody here like denies, you know, like the influence of.
I think they've been so successful at this point that, you know, even if they were to leave, there's enough, you know, gaslit collaborators that they'd probably just keep carrying on by themselves.
I disagree totally.
I mean, maybe it's just because I'm living in a university town, but it's like it seems there are a lot of people who are really true believers.
Hitler actually addresses this in Mein Kampf. He talks about how realizing that it was not his own people, but Jews who controlled the Marxist parties, that made him have some faith in his own people again.
That's why I love Faust. Faust is on the opposite team here of me, but Faust is honest. Like, Faust is honest whenever he thinks of something and it goes against his own view. That's why I like you, Faust. And not that I don't like you, Blitz, but I like Faust. He's done that twice now with me. I appreciate it.
Okay, man.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. You know, I think, you know, when I was talking earlier in the stream about the sort of class of people who become politicians and become journalists, I think that really feeds into it. I think that's part of the problem. It's the sort of person who wants to take these jobs is all, you know, the sort of person who ends up in these jobs are already predisposed to these issues, to embracing pause. I think I already went over that, but that's what I mean when I say that, like, there's enough of them that have been indoctrinated into this system already. It's like the sort of person who's going to follow in their footsteps and take up these new jobs as journalist or whatever is going to be going through the same programming from these people, and they'll be giving us the same outcomes, because that's just like I think that's part of how the system works.
I don't know. Actually, hold on. An example. Yeah,
can I address this whole when to bring up the JQ and so on? recently there was this podcast, mid of the 20th century, which had E. Michael Jones on. I'm not sure you're familiar with E. Michael Jones, but he's a Catholic academic who discusses the JQ in terms of Catholic doctrine and just historical narrative. He has some very good books on destruction of cities, pornography, sexual liberation, and so on. And the influence
everyone should read
Jews.
all his stuff, or at least listen to his podcast appearances.
Yeah, but the way he does it is actually clever, nuanced, and he brings up good academic research books. I don't see E. Michael Jones putting a swastika flag behind him and saying that the Jews are the problem and all of this very just shouty, unnuanced way of dealing with it. He would write an academic book on it. He would publish journals on it. If you were to call him an anti-Semite, he could refute you on every point that you make.
I think the contrast between him and what's his name, Alfred, who I was on the stream with recently, it couldn't be starker. Even though they'd probably like agree on paper with a lot of the questions, I would stand behind E. Michael Jones, but not with Alfred. Just because of their methods.
Agreed.
That's what, the thing that I always argue about is not concept but method, and I'm really turned off, unfunny and uninsightful, angry zealotry. But I'm very much for funny and insightful and clever commentary.
So I mean,
I think there's a go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you want to advocate for it, if you want to bring that up, do it the E. Michael Jones way, or get people to listen to him, or even like have suggest his books to people, because that is definitely. I mean, it depends on what kind of people you're bringing it up to, of course. I mean, some people are going to be more persuaded by that style of argument than others, but I think Jones and Ryan Falk or Alt-Hype or whatever, like those are like if you're presenting it in that fashion, then I don't think anyone could possibly be upset with you for bringing it up.
Well, that's not what I'm trying to avoid. Like I'm not the most scared of somebody being upset with me. Like what you guys aren't getting, right? Like E. Michael Jones. Yes, I've listened to him extensively. I even did one thing I hate doing, and I actually read like 8 pages of something he wrote one time. I hate reading. I have to listen to it. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, but like the thing is, like Blitz said, I'm really turned off. I don't like when I hear these people yelling and screaming and doing it in an unacademic way. Like, I get that, but people who yell and scream and doing it in an unacademic way don't come to you and get all butthurt whenever you're doing it in your academic way. There is room for all, and like if I try to bring E. Michael Jones up to my cousin, one second. If I try to introduce E. Michael Jones to my cousin Jamie, and he is a redneck fucking idiot, I will get nowhere. Nothing will happen. He will not change his views on anything. He'll stay asleep. He will keep only worrying about pussy and beer. Okay, that's not going to work with these people who are not as smart as you academics. All right, and I'm not saying we have to go around and hang swastikas everywhere. That's not what I'm advocating for. But like, I would much rather sit there and walk with Alfred Schaefer anywhere than I would some Zionist Jew who walks into a company and says, the first thing he thinks is, it's way too white in this place. Let's get some diversity. I mean,
I'm sure that I would rather hang out with him. Hold on. I think the issue is that any work that E. Michael Jones manages to do in converting people, the Alfred Schaefer's kind of undo by becoming kind of like a stick to beat the opposition with, because what will happen is the mainstream will just ignore E. Michael Jones and point at Alfred Schaefer and say, look, this is what anti-Jewry is. This is what anti-Semitism is. And they won't actually address any of the academic points because they have someone to point at and laugh.
Yeah, this is the one good thing. This is like the best part about, I hate to defend this guy because we were trashing him earlier and he deserves it, but like one of the only good things about Spencer is that he is relatively good looking, well educated, upper class. He is the complete opposite of the typical stereotype of people who are, of his particular types of views, just generally. There's a benefit to that, right?
Alfred Schaefer's that way. Alfred Schaefer's not a skinhead. He's an old. He was good looking in his heyday. He's got plenty of money. He's run a successful business for decades in Germany. So basically, at that point, you have a problem with the message, not the carrier.
I have a problem with the way he uses his rhetoric and his presentation.
I was going to say, if you want to try and get through to your brother or cousin, probably quoting scripture at him might be the best way to do it. I suppose I brought up supersessionism earlier. You probably Google that. You can probably find some decent verses on that sort of stuff and bring it up to him, because I think a lot of these people, their Jew-loving stuff is brought out of a religious sort of upbringing. I don't know. I can't speak personally to your particular situation.
I live in the South, so he's actually my brother cousin. Our parents are brother and sister, and I was just playing.
I believe it. I believe it.
I know you do. Well, look, guys, I really, Blitz, thank you for sending me the link. Thanks for letting me come on and talk to you for a second. I was just kidding. I'm not mad at you, obviously, but I do appreciate it. But I got to get back to work. I am in an all-black town today. The town I'm in is 82% black. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Hey, it's at least like it's a black ethno state. You just gotta act like you're a tourist.
Yeah, man. Yeah, if you work hard and you can assimilate.
Well, I am a quarter. I'm a quarter Sicilian, so I'm halfway there.
There you go.
All right,
Nice.
bye, you guys. I'll talk to you later on. Bye.
All right. It was great having you on. See ya.
See you. So, do we want to invite anyone else from the chat or call it a day?
I don't know. There's one Spurg I see posting a lot.
Yeah, he's a Dutch guy who's half Italian who has a serious objection with European nationalism.
Well,
he's
I
all
know,
about the
because
whole
if-
white. Yeah,
I would be too if I'm half black.
yeah, exactly.
Oof. It's like
what part of Italy is he from?
Let's see if
God
there's
only knows.
is there anybody in chat who has anything insightful or funny to say? Otherwise,
Well, one of the guys brought up E. Michael Jones, and he reminded me actually of him. What's his name? Hold on. Finnish Germania. He had some interesting things to say. And God's Own Prototype. He had some good things as well.
Yeah. Well, it's understandable if they feel like just staying in chat. It's I wanted to actually Christ post a lot more, but I never got around to it because the conversation just flew. We had very high energy here, and
I would recommend, if you're going to bring someone on, you should probably reach out to the people at the Godcast, especially Super Lutheran, especially for you, because he's in like seminary school. So if you wanted to do anything, he's he is actually like going to be able to quote chapter and verse to you on stuff. So it'd be really good.
And maybe have some kind of preparation, because if you want to talk things, maybe have a little bit of a script.
No, that's just the thing, that the live stream like this should just be us talking like we would at the bar. What we're doing here essentially is like people listening in on what our discussion would be if we were sitting at a table at a bar drinking beer.
And a random burger walks in and he's like, "Why aren't you white nationalists?"
No, I really do like what the best thing about Dingo is? It's his courteousness. Like he does have those southern manners, and that's something that is worth respecting. Makes me always want to bring him back.
So what you're saying is we should duel with him.
We should duel with him. Yes, over which identity? But if I win, American nationalists will be forced to call themselves Finnish nationalists in the future.
Do you really want that, though?
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Really? So you're going to get all the behaviors of the burgers online, and they're going to be calling themselves Finnish.
Oh,
Are you sure
God.
about this?
Oh, God. Yeah.
You'll have Orthodox Finnish nationalists on the cockbox.
Oh boy. Wow. Oof. Yeah, we have cringy enough nationalists already. We don't need any more.
Yeah, really? Give an example.
Really. Yeah, well, we do have, the stereotypical people that, the lowbrow, not very intelligent people who turn a lot of people off by, in talking, publicly, even to journalists about how state should use violence on the migrants. It's very poor optics, because it makes it easy for the media to, when this guy who's literally has before this been in like National Socialist outfits and has no hair, for purely aesthetic reasons, and comes on camera to talk about, wearing his steel-toe boots and his military camouflage pants, why we need to throw all the migrants out of Finland. Then they wonder, like, God damn, why is the system painting us this bad? This is we need to get the truth out.
You saw the picture I sent you of the demonstration in Germany earlier today.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so that's really good Dutch optics. So for the audience, there's this group called the NVU, which are like our skinhead group. And there's this one guy called Stefan Wijkamp, who's a member of it, and he's always dressed up as Hitler with the hair and the mustache. And he goes to every demonstration dressed like that. And yeah, that's really peak optics right there. It's just dress up like Hitler and just pretend you're him. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, that's how we're gonna wake up the masses, bro. It's when they see that that guy in the street wearing Nazi attire, looking just like Hitler with a salute, then they think, oh my God, and they feel their state programming crumbling, and there's like, oh God, I hate Jews now. The fuck, and then they register with the Freiburger movement. That's how we win, bros.
It's not Freiburger, it's Reichsburger.
Oh, Reichsburger. Oh,
yeah. But well, isn't that kind of what happened with that Er ist wieder da film, where there were actually people hugging Hitler's like, yes, she's back.
Yeah, that's true. And they actually broke like German law by saluting with him because they thought it was like they did. I guess they were tourists and didn't know, because I think people were actually. I think some people were tried. There was a case a year ago when American tourists wanted to take some cool pictures in front of the Bundestag, the parliament building in Berlin, by hiling. They were Japanese. Yeah, Japanese. They were hiling there, and then German officials came and arrested them, and they were charged with hate speech, displaying.
They were like unapologetically greatest honorary Eddie.
Yes. I unapologetically love the Japanese. They're fucking great. They're the best thing that Asia has ever produced, except for Finns.
Yeah. Did you know that every single election in Japan since the Second World War has been won by the same party?
I think the opposition won once.
Really?
Very recently, like 10 years ago, maybe? Like middle of the financial crisis.
Oh.
Okay. Huh. Well, maybe except that one time then.
Yeah, they ruled for like 1 year and that was it.
Yeah, it's more like a daimyo culture still. It's the parties are clans, or extensions of a clan, and the clan rules.
The funny thing is like they haven't actually had the same PM for outside of Shinzo Abe. It's been like a constant, each guy and heroes after like 1 year for whatever failure happens, or it's like
that. Responsible government, that's what you call that.
Do you know what? Do you know what the peak optics are? Unironically, it's this new trend, which is what's it called? Like T-pose. You've seen those memes on Twitter when white teenagers do the T-pose, reclaim our future.
I saw them, but I don't get it.
When they standing in a row on top of urinals, doing the T-pose. And then it has like VHS, like a filter on top of it with the captions, and history, stuff like that. Now that is peak optics. Fucking love that joke. It's the best thing, because this is how you can advance an idea. You find something that's funny, that's relevant, harmless, and something usually the young people like, and then you just ascribe an evil Nazi meaning to it. People are memeing it to be like the new Hitler salute. And then, the left-wing media, as they always do, they can't help themselves. They will start reporting on this, and then it will de facto be true. And then a lot of, what's it called, normies will, just like with Pepe the Frog, they will laugh at them for calling them basket of deplorables, the evil Nazis who use the evil frog. And then, it's a way to actually break the programming. Is what I'm trying to say. It's not, you don't break the programming through serious Hitler posting, but you do it through unserious and comedical effect. Everyone who got red pill on Poll you know, except for a very few very autistic people. They came there for the memes. They thought that the memes were hilarious and were super funny. Came there for a good time. And it's through humor you convert people, not through serious and angry posting.
Well, no, you convert some people through humor. Other people you convert through autistic charts about human biodiversity. Other people you convince through life experience. Everyone has a different story towards being red pilled. Humor is one of the more effective ones, I think, but there's other ways people get converted.
I was going to say that, just a second. What's this?
Oh,
Oh, did we lose him?
well, no, he muted himself. There was something happening, I guess.
Oh, right, yeah.
So
Confused
I
me.
guess we'll just start wrapping up, or what?
Yeah, we'll start wrapping up here. It's been a very good stream.
Mhm.
Let's see. We were taken down from SoundCloud again, as we tend to be. So currently we're only uploading on YouTube. You can follow.
You should put it.
You can follow
put it
me
on
on.
Spreaker.
Yeah, we should set up on Spreaker next.
But sorry, someone had to talk to me. That was all.
Yeah, but if you want updates to follow us, see where we're at, see where the new episode is at, just follow me on Twitter at BlitzyBlatzy, and just subscribe to us on YouTube, like our video, share it, show our podcast to your mom, to your coworkers, to your boss, donate
Your
to our
girlfriend.
PayPal, and I think we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I just like to say that apparently Sargon and V are live on a channel called Rocking Mr. E right now, and it would be just terrible if we went and raided their chat.
Oh no! Let's go and pay them.
I hate that I had to cut out there for just a second because I was going to do, since we're closing out, but I was just going to say, instead of read Putnam, if you haven't, that was the Robert Putnam's E Pluribus Unum was the best, I think, way of getting through to people on diversity being a bad thing, because it doesn't matter if they're Chinese and well behaved, it doesn't matter the crime, it doesn't matter the economics, you know, just the mere presence of these different people will lead to a breakdown in civil society, and there's just they don't have any way to argue against it. And I found that has been in real life effective way to get through to people. Anyways,
all right, well, we'll see you guys next week. I've been Blitz from Europa Weekly, and we're gonna end the broadcast here. Bye.
One question.
What?
Oh my God!
What?
Come on, you're stepping over me. You're stepping over me like
When
this.
is Pusher coming back?
Oh yeah,
That's classified information.
I have
the answer, but I can't tell you.
It's a secret.
He's out still getting cigarettes. No, but stay tuned. He'll come back when he comes back. Don't worry about it.
all right. Fine.
All right. So for this time, without Faust ruining it, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Hold on.